Hey there, Griff Hamlin here from Blues Guitar Unleashed. Welcome and thanks for joining me. In today's video, I'm going to talk about a rhythm technique, and I get asked about this a lot. It's that sort of, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Kenny Wayne Shepherd. This happens a lot like in funk. That sort of thing. There's actually a lot of instances where this comes into play. And it is a technique that I'm doing where I am actually with my first finger pushing underneath some of my other fingers. So let me show you what I mean by that. If I wanted to play, for example, this kind of a move. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm using a very, very, very heavy right hand. As I come up across the strings, I hit them really hard. I'm quite literally dragging my pick. I'm actually, you'll notice I'm angling a little bit. I'm really dragging my pick hard across the strings with nothing attached. Now the first step is to be able to do that. And as I come back down, I lightly place all of my fingers on the fretboard, very lightly. I don't want anything to come out. I want everything to mute. Okay, that's probably pretty straightforward for most people. But notice that I'm really digging in. I get asked a lot about breaking strings, for example. This is the technique that will break strings. Bending, I almost never break a string bending. It's digging in. It's that really heavy right hand. Really digging across those strings. I'll often bust strings down here if I break them at all. I don't break them very often, but if I do, it's going to be here under my pick. And you'll notice that my hand sort of makes a circular motion, and that tends to do with the way that I'm slightly rotating my pick. So I'm kind of, notice I'm sort of tipping it to kind of drag it across the strings. Even my thumbnail drags across a little bit. When I come back down, it's a little bit of a whip. You can see with my wrist. So this is not a timid move. Now, when I come back down, let's say that I want to grab that 7th fret on the 4th string with my 3rd finger. It's fairly straightforward to lightly, my 1st and 2nd fingers are being very light. I could even go so far as to use my pinky for that note. Notice that everything else is dead. Okay, completely dead. So this would be the next stage in the evolution of this. Right, is to do like that. Well, here's the thing. What if I want this note here, which notice my first finger can play. It's the 5th fret of the 4th string. Well, notice that I'm still muting everything, right? But I push down with my first finger. My other 3 fingers are doing the muting. Okay? Now, that's a little bit tricky. That is a very subtle move. It's challenging, but it's important. It's something that I really believe you want to add to your bag of tricks. It's a really cool sound. If we're doing something, like I said, kind of so when I do that, now my thumb is kind of helping out around here, but even if I take my thumb away, it's not actually doing the work. So don't think that my thumb is what's doing the work. Again, my middle finger, my pinky, my ring finger are all very lightly touching the strings, such that when I push down with my first finger, it gets underneath. Now, again, like I said, this is a very subtle Very, very subtle thing, okay? Obviously, the distance between that string and my additional muting fingers is minuscule. If you happen to be familiar with playing slide guitar, there's a technique called playing behind the slide. It's the same thing. I don't have a slide handy, but if you play, for example, say at the 7th fret across the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th strings, and you push with your first finger underneath, the slide will handle those 2 notes, and your first finger will get that one. And you can actually play behind the slide. This is a thing that can be done. Now, it's not trivial. Like I said, it's a very, very subtle move. But I would love for you to start to kind of play around with it for 2 reasons. It creates an enormous amount of control. And control is hard to really even quantify just how important having control over all of your sounds is on your guitar. We start notes, we tend not to always finish them, right? And we tend not to control all of the other strings, everything else that's going on, okay? So I really want to put that out there, that this is an important thing to try to add, even if maybe right now it sounds, really, really, really bad. So let's talk briefly about kind of, how to go from, I'll say, the easiest to maybe the more challenging. So starting out, like I said, you would want to come up, let go, and just come down. And I'm just doing this in swing 8th notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, right? So that's going to get us used to that light touch. If you're getting this, you're pushing. We don't want to push. Very light touch. None of, if you hear thuds or thumps or squeaks, that's not what we want. Okay? Next, it'll be easy to add a note, or easier to add a note under your 3rd or your pinky, right? Under your 3rd finger or your pinky. So for example, the 7th fret on the 4th string. Now, the first several times you try this, you're probably going to get things like where there's going to be a whole bunch of extra stuff ringing out, okay? The way to fix that, I know I always say to slow down. In this case, though, you kind of have to push the speed a little bit, because what you're going to learn how to do, what you're going to develop the skill of doing, is hearing the mistake and correcting it before the next one. That's a skill. It's something that you have to learn, and that takes some practice. And so when you come at this, sometimes you're going to get some noises. You just have to keep going. You just have to keep trying it. If you do this really slow, it doesn't sound very good. But you can go slow, and then you can correct it. Right? And so notice that every time I work to correct it. But do your best to start to push the speed as soon as possible. You want to be able to do this comfortably at maybe 120 beats a minute on a metronome if you have one. That's a good goal, okay? And that's going to be sort of a standard swing, a faster swing. I'd call that like, pride and joy speed, right? So that's a good place to be. Now, if you get to the point where you can do that, the next thing is going to be to start to try to add in that first finger. And again, it's going to be more about correcting than nailing it in the first place. But that's how we get it done. And the riff that I was doing earlier was the 7th fret on the 4th string. That's beat 1, 2, and I was actually doing it down and up. 1, 2, I'm playing 16th notes. 1 and And that's the 8th fret across those top 2 strings. So 1, and notice that I'm just getting nothing there. 2, and 3, and that was back to the 7th fret on the 4th string. Then I'm going to get 2 on the 5th fret. 4, and 4, and 1, and 2, 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and sometimes I'm just going to mute it out. So these are muted, and those are not. So you can see I'm doing a little bit of everything. So it is definitely a challenging thing. I've worked with many students, trying to do this technique over the years. It's not trivial. I will be the first to admit that. However, it will create an enormous amount of control in your left hand. Of course, for playing, the Stevie Ray Vaughan, Kenny Wayne Shepherd style of blues, this is incredibly important. However, that control bleeds into everything else that you play. Right? I could be playing, Buddy Guy, Albert Collins. It doesn't matter. Freddie King. I will still use this technique. It comes up all the time. If I'm playing like funk style, like James Brown or Prince, I still use this stuff. It comes up all the time. Having that control with your left hand to be able to mute out everything except what you want is absolutely essential. So I hope that you will take some time to work on that. Now, I purposely didn't have tab in this video, and there isn't any tab here. And the reason that I did that is because I don't want you to read it. It's kind of really hard to show in the tab exactly how this is supposed to be played. It would take a whole lot of notation and a whole lot of writing, and I don't really want to do that. I would rather that you just play it along with me. So one more time, I'm going to start with an up that leads me into beat 1. 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1. Mute, mute, don't mute. So a lot of different techniques all together. If you can get that, if you can get the hang of it, you're on your way. You're doing great. All right. So hopefully you get some time to practice on that. It might take a little while. That's all right. Stay with it. It's worth it. It's absolutely worth it. Take your time. There's no hurry. All right. So again, my name is Griff Hamlin from Blues Guitar Unleashed. I will leave links near this video to my website, etc., etc., etc. And I hope to see you again real soon. If you have guitar playing friends that you think would dig this video, by all means share it with them, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.